When a brand from the Eastern Hemisphere ventures into the West, it often finds itself in a cauldron of competition from the Europeans, particularly from Germany. This is the exact predicament that Genesis has encountered with their now facelifted G70, which is here to challenge the long-standing success of the BMW 3 Series. A tall order for a marque that's been in the UK for under 2 years. So, does the G70 make a case for itself? In a nutshell, yes, but it is a little complicated. Let's start with the driving dynamics. So, how does it drive?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag really. Let me explain why. Across the pond in America, Genesis fit their G70s with the much meatier 3.3 litre engines, and they produce around 370 horsepower. Sadly for us here in the UK, where things are a bit more boring, we have a 4-cylinder 2 litre turbocharged engine, which puts out 245 horsepower and 353 newton meters of torque. Now, that's an important number. I'll tell you why in a minute, but for now, let me just stick with the power. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion what Genesis have done is try and pull a bit of a Porsche. Now, it's common knowledge by this point that they drastically undermine the amount of power that their cars produce. I mean, their turbos, they're said to produce around, 620, 30 horsepower, but they just don't. I don't know who they're trying to kid. And I think Genesis are following a very similar motto with this car. This has 245 horsepower, but when the mood takes you and you decide to put your foot down, it really is a joy. It really is a joy. See, sometimes when you have too much fun, all the sensors start going off, of which there are many. Now, this supposed 245 horsepower is delivered through an 8-speed semi-automatic gearbox. And I have to say, it is one of my favourite things about this car, because I've found that cars that normally have 8-speed gearboxes, they're quite lackluster, they have too much thinking to do, there's too much decision making involved, and that makes them feel quite dim-witted. Especially at low revs, it just feels like you get up to 2,000 revs and it's like, it's got too much thinking to do. But I have to say, the gearbox in this car is magical. There is a sweet spot that you can hit between 4,000 and 5,000 revs, which is where most of the power is delivered. And that's when that turbocharger that we mentioned earlier really starts kicking in. Now I have to say, complementing this gearbox are the various modes that you can set the car in. Now of course you have your traditional eco and your comfort mode, but alongside those you also have sport and sport plus. But my favourite mode has to be comfort. The power is still very residual as you make your way up the rev range, but I have to say the sport mode is excellent in this car. The pickup is just as good as anything you can find in this category really. Now the thing is, despite having access to all of these modes, is sports mode actually a lot better than comfort mode? I mean, yes, of course, it tautens the car up, it stiffens things up, and there is a really nice feature in this car when you do actually switch it into race mode, where one, the dials do start going red, which is really nice. But on top of that as well, the seats along the side here start to close in around you. It does make you feel like you're in a proper super saloon, which of course this isn't. It's not trying to be a marauding M3 or a crazy C63. It's just supposed to be something right in the middle, which can touch on every single element that a super saloon can, by keeping it mild. Hence, it's got a really good eco mode. Now, the final mode we have here is Sport Plus, and from what I've seen, there isn't a dramatic difference from Sport and Sport Plus, aside from the fact that you turn your traction control off. And quite frankly, here on this road, when the weather is as typically British as it is today, I don't think it's a smart idea, because this is an expensive car and it's a press car and I'm a student. So I don't think I'm in a financial position right now to pay off, well, I'll tell you at the end of the video how much this car costs, but I definitely don't have enough to pay this car off if I put it in a ditch. So for that reason, I'm swiftly going to put it back into comfort mode and carry on with my drive.
The G70 is a car that certainly has presence. It exudes class and elegance befitting of a vehicle that's several price brackets above, and wouldn't look out of place rolling through the glittering streets of central London at night. This premium feel is given a unique facet by way of its split head and taillights. I wasn't sure about them at first, but they really begin to grow on you. A poignant blend of curved body panels and straight fishes across its edges mean that this hunkered down, executive body represents design language that is equally as consistent throughout as it is soulful. Its inverted pentagonal grille contributes to what is a very pretty face, and it does seriously echo Bentley, inherently contributing to the number of heads that the G70 turns. A number of people had actually asked me if it was indeed a Bentley, which means that Luke Donkerwalk, formerly of Bentley and now the man responsible for the design of the facelifted G70, has brought just the right amount of his former aesthetic flair with him to Genesis. Moving on to the interior, the whole cabin feels simple yet contemporary and doesn't have an overload of dispensable features that some new saloons suffer from. Along the center console, you'll also find a host of creature comforts like buttons to activate the heated seats and steering wheel, set the climate control, and even a flat charging surface for your smartphone. Most things are controlled from a 10.25-inch infotainment touchscreen, which is not only incredibly easy to use on the move, but also just the right size. Any smaller and it wouldn't have fit the proportions of the rest of the interior. Any larger and it would have started to compromise the accessibility of the physical buttons. With Apple CarPlay and Android Auto both included, navigating between your favorite sounds are done with ease. But one very obviously glaring hole is the navigation system. Not only can it be dim-witted at times, but it also lacks an unusual number of locations. Though, this is negated with the CarPlay options, since most people opt to use applications such as Waze or Google Maps these days. The screen is also used as the primary control mechanism for the advanced safety features, such as the evasive steering and highway lane assists. At times they can behave quite intrusively, almost aggressively pulling you back into the middle of the lane when you least expect it to. You can turn anything off if you feel they're unnecessary or hinder your journey in any way, but I'd strongly opt against this, since one of the G70's standout party pieces is its near-conscious ability to avoid accidents. As your body cushions itself into the G70's cabin, you realise that it is a very classy place to be. The build quality of the plastics and rubbers used to decorate the interior look and feel expensive, and the seats themselves are extremely comfortable, especially if you have the Napa leather seat option selected, which makes the interior look equally as striking as it is relaxing. The rear legroom, however, is poor. For a vehicle of this size, there's very little space in any corner of the car for someone over 6 foot to comfortably maneuver, with this compromise being made to accommodate for a massive 330-litre boot. Though, I do feel some boot space could have been sacrificed for rear legroom.
So despite the fact that I was in sport mode, I am in the Cotswolds, and it is one of the best places to come to test a car. There are a wonderful mix of B-roads around here. And the thing is, that's one area where I really am struggling to understand this car almost. It's got a curb weight of 1,675 kilograms, which, I mean, it's not heavy, but it's not light either. And you can definitely feel it when you're going through the corners. It does feel like a big lombarding beast as you're going through the corners. However, one place where this car is hugely benefited, especially the weight is benefited when you're going around the corners, is the fact that this car has a lovely set of Michelin Pilot 4S tyres all the way around. And it's common knowledge by this point that they are some of the best tyres that money can buy. They are super saloon tyres on a normal saloon. And it just adds such a sense of pantomime to this car. And just to take that pantomime even further, have you seen the brakes on this thing? Have you seen those massive red Brembo brakes? Those two in tandem really do make this thing such a joy around the corners. Yes, you can feel the weight. Yes, you do think, oh, you know, should I switch it into manual? No, maybe I should keep it in auto. There are a lot of thoughts running through your mind. But when you just put your foot down, those 4S tyres give you all the confidence in the world to lug this thing round the corner. And then when you get to the end of it and you reach a Citroen C4, whatever, something ugly, those Brembo brakes are going to keep you safe. They really will. The thing is, of course, this car has an electric steering rack, and typically speaking, electric steering racks are a bit dull. But I feel like Genesis are tapering with the ice with this car. It's a very normal feeling steering rack, But because of all of these extra additions it's got with the tyres and the brakes and the phenomenal power that you can get when you're coming out of a corner, especially when you're between 3,000 and 4,000 revs, I feel like Genesis are onto something with this steering rack. It's very normal, but why is that such a bad thing? It's a normal car with a normal steering rack with fun elements all the way around it. And that makes for a really good driving experience. Certainly makes for a safe one. So ultimately, everything I've mentioned now, what does it culminate in? What sort of driving experience can you expect from your G70? Well, again, it's a very mixed bag. It's got all the facets of a super saloon. Like I said, it's got the tyres, it's got the brakes, and it does feel quick for what it is, for 245 horsepower. It genuinely does feel quick. But I can't help but feel like if this car was given that 3.3 litre engine and it did have another 200 horsepower added on top, this could be a serious contender with the M3 and the C63, which arguably are its two biggest rivals, the 3 Series and the C-Class. If Genesis were to make that leap, I feel like this car really could kick it with an M3 and a C63. Maybe it could even be a better driver's car. Now, I know that's a very, very bold statement. I mean, the M3 has long been heralded as the king of super saloons. But Genesis are on the right path with this car. Now, having said all those things, there's one number and one figure which stands head and toes above everything else, which is the price of this car. So with this engine, with all the trim, all the specs, all the technology that this car has, it costs £47,000. And I'm not sure why. Why is it so expensive? You can pick up a fully loaded BMW 330d Touring with the X-Drive package for the same price as this. And that comes with a lot more features. It has a lot more power. It has a lot more of everything. So why? So the obvious argument to the BMW thing is that you'd get this car because you want something that's unique. Fair enough. If you want something unique, you could have an Alfa Romeo Giulia. 40 grand you can have one for. 40, 41 grand, there or there. That's unique. It's an Alfa. It's what a petrol head wants. And if you're looking for something unique, you'd be hard pressed to find something better. Now, before we bring this video to a close, I just want to explain one last thing to you, something that can't be measured. It's how a car makes you feel. Now, I've given you alternatives to this car. I've given you every reason why you shouldn't have one, and why you should. But at the end of the day, I can't escape the fact that this car is going tomorrow. I've had it for 3 days. You know, I would have covered close to 1,000 miles in that time. I've grown to really like this car. In fact, I don't just like this car. I think it makes me want to say the L word. The big L word. It's got a personality about it. And you can tell when you're driving in and around town, people look and stare. It just looks so different. It's quirky. You know, it's not trying to be a big, shouty muscle car like an M3. It's quiet. It's different. It's handsome. It's going to divide opinion. Yeah, I mean, a car that has split headlights and taillights is always going to. But there's clearly something about it which attracts people, which makes them feel like, you know what? I should look at it again. And those are just people looking at it. Having been with one for the last 3 days, I can tell you it makes you feel the exact same when you're driving it, when you live with it, when you have to cover long distances with it. Maybe it's a cliche saying, but it does feel like the family Labrador. Granted, it's a very expensive Labrador, but it does feel like a family Labrador nonetheless. It makes you feel safe. It makes you feel happy. It makes you feel like every time you get in, you're gonna get home. But above all else, it feels like a friend. So I might not be able to justify the fact that this car costs as much as it does. But I can tell you that I really, really adore it.